Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Iqra and I am a remedial therapist at Kazim Trust. I am really honored to be the moderator of this panel. I warmly welcome all of you. Dear audience, I assure you that this program shall be full of information and we will make a lot of memories. Today, the topic of our panel discussion is Remodeling Inclusion. And I would like to begin my panel discussion with an amazing quote by Lisa Friedman. Inclusion is a philosophy that embraces the idea that everyone has something of value to contribute and that everyone has the right to belong. Very well said. The audience, it's now time to invite our honorable panelists on board with us. They're ready to give away their experiential knowledge. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first panelist. She is associated with an amazing organization called Dyslexia Association Singapore. They are Kazim Trust academic partners as well for this conference. Let's welcome Ms. Siti Mariam Daud. Ms. Mariam began her educational journey in an educational therapist at the Dyslexia Association of Singapore in 2013. She holds a bachelor's degree in science psychology from the Central Queensland University and a Master of Arts in Special Educational Needs from the University of South Wales, UK. She has more than 7 years of experience in the field of special educational needs, especially in dyslexia and math. She is a senior lecturer at the DAS Academy and an associate fellow with the Registrar of Educational Therapists, Asia. Now, I would like to welcome Ms. Siti Mariam, and my first question from you, Ma'am Mariam, is that how inclusion has remodeled and has the terminology of inclusive education evolved over the years? Over to you, Ms. Mariam.
I think when we talk about inclusion, there is no one fixed definition of inclusion. There are several definitions by different authors, but it's defined and practiced differently around the world. So it does have a broad definition of educating students with SEN in mainstream schools, and there is a consensus on the underlying philosophy of inclusion. So it is quite impossible, to standardize inclusive practices across countries because of the wide diversity in the history, the culture, the laws, and the levels of educational and economic development of each country. But all these definitions, they all have one main theme. It relates to much more than adapting education to the specific needs of students with SEN. So as paradigms have changed, the terminology used have also changed over time. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, so we'll take a look at the different definitions that have changed over time. So firstly, we had normalization. So this seeks the involvement and participation of students with SEN in the general education environment. Then we had mainstreaming, which was used as an informal way of describing the practice of including students with SEN in regular classrooms and giving them the exact same opportunities as any other kid, to enjoy every aspect of the school experience, from academics to socialization. So in other words, it was an attempt to move students from special education classrooms to regular education classrooms, only in situations where they're able to keep up with their typically developing peers without specially designed instruction or support. Then for integration, so an integrated classroom is a setting where students with SEN, they learn alongside typically developing peers. Extra supports may be implemented to help them adapt to the regular curriculum, and sometimes separate special education programs are in place within the classroom or through pull-out services. So in theory, integration is a positive approach that seeks to help students with SEN be part of the larger group. But in practicality, the differences in the way all people learn can make this system of education less effective overall. So historically, many countries have adopted the integrated education model. But again, with the shifting paradigms, many are also trying to move towards the actual merging of special education and regular education, with the belief that all children are different. They will learn differently and should have full access to the same curriculum. So students with SEN are not expected to adjust to a fixed education structure. Rather, the structure is adjusted so that everyone's learning styles can be met. So the promise of inclusion or inclusive education is that it brings all students together in one classroom and community, regardless of their strengths or weaknesses in any area. And it seeks to maximize the potential of all students. So it is an effort to make sure that diverse learners, those with SEN, different languages, cultures, different homes and family lives, different interests and ways of learning are exposed to teaching strategies that reach them as individual learners. So inclusive schools ask teachers to provide appropriate individualized supports and services to all students without the stigmatization that comes with separation. Teachers in inclusive classrooms also vary their styles to enhance learning for all students. So when it comes to remodeling inclusion, inclusion does demand changes at various levels. So we have the macro level where government policies and initiatives promote the social and educational inclusion of people with SEN. We have the meso level where educational institutions develop inclusive forms of organization, curriculum, and pedagogy, which include diverse learners. We also have the micro level where teachers look critically at their practice in order to include learners within the classroom. So the trend in education today is moving away from integration and towards inclusion. While both approaches aim to bring students with SEN into the mainstream classroom, one system expects students to adapt to the pre-existing structure, while the other ensures the existing education system will adapt to each student. And I think that's how we should be approaching the teaching and learning of students with SEN.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mariam, and very well explained about the evolution of terminologies and how inclusion actually demands changes. Now, since we are talking about inclusion, Ms. Mariam, I really want to know about the interventions and strategies that should be used for supportive inclusion in classroom setups.
So we know dyslexia is a literacy-based difficulty, while dyscalculia is an arithmetical-based difficulty. However, to support inclusion in the classroom and to support both learners with dyslexia and dyscalculia, we can usually approach teaching and learning in a multisensory manner. So when I say multisensory, it means that we want the students to activate as many senses as possible during the learning process. So make learning tactile, kinesthetic, as you carry out the visual and auditory component. Let me show you a few examples. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, so if you can see my screen, you'll see a card with the CH. So for example, for students with dyslexia, how we can make learning multisensory. So let's say you want to introduce a new sound, a CH. We get the learner to trace the letters while sounding out CH. Okay, so by tracing, you have that tactile element. You can in fact enhance that tactile element by getting them to trace on a rough surface, for example, sandpaper. Now, tracing also incorporates the kinesthetic element while sounding the letters out, okay, as the visual and auditory element. So you're in fact tapping on 4 senses here. So even when getting them to learn sight words, you can actually do something similar. But what I do is I use glitter glue and I write out the sight word on felt. So, glitter glue gives that raised tactile element. So they will trace and sound out the letters of the sight word. Is to help them remember both how to read the sight word as well as to how to spell the sight word. Then, in fact, we follow this multisensory approach for teaching grammar for writing. So this grammar for writing is actually adapted from Project Reid. It's taught through a system of diagramming using symbols to represent sentence parts. So diagramming sentences is multisensory as it helps learners to simultaneously verbalize, write, draw the symbols, and read the words or the sentences. So it comes with a sequence of teaching and different symbols to represent different sentence parts. So for example, if you take a look at the slide here, okay, we start by introducing the bare bone sentence. So we could actually provide a pipe cleaner, okay, something like this, and get the learner to form the shape that you see here. So you have the triangle in front, you fold into a triangle, and then this long tail at the end. Okay, so then we get them to trace the pipe cleaner, and as they trace the pipe cleaner, get them to verbalize a sentence, starts with a capital letter and ends with a full stop. So that triangle at the front indicates where the capital letter should be. So, and there's this tactile and kinesthetic element of forming that triangle adds on to that memory. Then we introduce a subject, okay? And we add hand signals to remember the different nouns. So a noun is a person, okay, a place, a thing, or an idea. So what you can get them to do is a noun is a person, can get them to point to themselves or get them to point to someone else or another person in the classroom. A place, okay, a thing, okay, point to something in the classroom, or they can grab an object in the classroom or an idea. Okay, so there are multiple sensory elements here that will help them to remember what is a noun. And of course, that's only step 2 of the sequence of teaching. And if you're interested to find out more, you can get in touch with me or read up on Project Reid. Now, for students with dyscalculia, the multisensory learning approach advocates a concrete, pictorial, abstract instructional sequence, as well as explicit language to make math concepts memorable. So it's about using as many sensory areas as possible when learning a new concept. So the path to automaticity is actually strengthened when many neural connections are made. So the student may hear the teacher's voice or his or her own as the visual component is engaged, as the hands are manipulating objects. So when the hands are engaged, so is attention. So multiple sensory inputs create stronger associations for learning and memory. Explicit instruction is concept-based. So the student models a concept, links it to the language, and constructs or builds meaning. So learners are not taught how to do a thing, but rather what it means. So they don't push numbers around with no meaning or context. They construct meaning. So through the CPA approach, learning makes use of physical and visual aids to build a child's understanding of abstract topics. So this CPA approach was developed by American psychologist Jerome Bruner. It is an essential technique within the Singapore method of teaching math for mastery. So students tend to better understand math concepts that are taught through manipulative or visual teaching strategies. So using lots of practical resources such as counters, bit strings, and multi-link cubes will be beneficial. So the CPA approach builds on children's existing knowledge by introducing abstract concepts in a concrete and tangible way. So it involves moving from concrete to pictorial representations to abstract symbols and problems. So really, concrete is the doing stage. Okay, so during this stage, learners use concrete objects to model problems. Pictorial is the seeing stage. Here, visual representations of concrete objects are used to model problems. And the more experiences a learner has at the concrete and pictorial levels, the better frame of reference the learner has for the abstract stage, where he needs to represent his work in the symbolic form. And as much as possible, we should try to do the 3 stages of the CPA approach simultaneously. Okay, so when students get to experience a learning through multiple pathways, it stimulates their brains best and engage them more deeply in the subject matter. So in fact, all children benefit from exposure to multi-sensory lessons, including those who may not have any difficulties with learning. And this is what we mean by inclusion, right? Whether general education or special education, ultimately using a multi-sensory approach in a learning environment helps to meet the varying needs of all children, giving them each a chance to succeed. Thank you.
Wonderful, Miss Mariam, and amazing strategies you shared with us today. Well, being a remedial therapist, we also use different approaches at Kazim Trust, and we try to help children and individuals to learn at their own pace and capacity. Basically, we give them the platform to learn differently. Thank you so much. Dear audience, as we all know that inclusion and diversity plays a very vital role in bringing about societal change. So, and every country is doing its best to bring inclusive education and to work towards it. Now, for my next question, I would like to invite our next panelist She is also one of the esteemed member of the DAS team. Let's welcome Ms. Rebecca Shelena. Ms. Rebecca has been with Dyslexia Association of Singapore since 2014. She is an associate lecturer with DAS Academy and she provides intervention in literacy skills as well as mathematics. Ms. Rebecca has completed her postgraduate certificate in special educational needs and specialist diploma in specific learning differences. She completed her Master of Education in Curriculum and Teaching with National Technological University. Ms. Rebecca is a member of the Registrar Educational Therapist Asia. Well, Ms. Rebecca, welcome. My question from you is, how has Singapore's initiative for inclusive education been influenced by international developments?
Okay, so in Singapore, the policy of enrolling students with SEN in mainstream schools has largely been influenced by international developments, which then led to changes to national legislation. For example, the Salamanca Statement, which established inclusive education on an international footing. Now, with this statement, governments around the world have slowly adopted the principle of inclusive education to inform policy and practice. As a result, the number of students with SEN in mainstream schools in Singapore has grown steadily over recent years. Although Singaporean students consistently score near the top in science, math, and reading achievement on an international assessments, many students with special needs still receive their education in schools separated from their mainstream peers. So in 2004, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong discussed a new vision of Singapore becoming an inclusive society that embraces all individuals with special learning needs. Ever since he made this call, changes were made to the educational policy in a bid to foster inclusion and create an inclusive education system for all students, especially those with SEN. So, for example, there was a significant increase in funding allocation for the redevelopment of school infrastructure and professional development of mainstream teachers to better support students with SEN in mainstream schools. Singapore adopts the dual-track education system. So students either go to the mainstream school or the special needs school. So children with mild special educational needs are in the mainstream school. One of the initiatives taken to build a more inclusive education is the introduction of allied educators in the mainstream school. Their role is to provide remediation for learners with SEN. As a result of these changes, more students with SEN are being educated in mainstream schools with their typically developing peers. In fact, a recent report in 2020 showed that around 80% of students with special needs are taught in mainstream schools, while the remaining 20% with higher needs go to special needs schools. Now, more emphasis is also being placed on supporting these students. For example, all primary schools are now staffed with at least one allied educator to support learners with SEN in both literacy and mathematics, as well as the introduction of the school-based dyslexia remediation program. For students in primary 1 and 2 level between 7 to 8 years old who have learning difficulties are supported through a learning support program, also known as LSP. For primary 3 and 4 students between 9 to 10 years old, they are supported through school-based dyslexia remediation program, known as SDR. If students require support beyond B4 level, they are enrolled into Dyslexia Association of Singapore, DAS, for continual remediation up till secondary school, up to about 16 years old. Apart from this, students diagnosed with learning difficulty may also receive exam accommodations. This include extended time, getting a prompter, large font and page size, one-sided printing of assessment papers, and also exemptions from mother tongue language, which is their second language. Similar to Singapore's efforts to a more inclusive society, other countries around the world are also making changes to their education system with a common goal: to provide education for all learners in a mainstream school, regardless of their abilities. However, there are many factors that may influence this move, which may differentiate how inclusive is the education system in various countries. So as countries of different regions face the vast array of challenges unique to their educational systems, it becomes apparent that inclusive societies are intricately tied to social inclusion policy initiatives and developments in education. So governments are becoming increasingly aware of the need to review their educational systems as they attempt to define what an inclusive society is and how to make inclusion truly effective. Singapore is a unique example of a country that has the resources and the vision, but currently lacks an educational system designed to fully include individuals with special needs. It is still work in progress.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks a lot for sharing about the initiatives that have been taken by Singapore towards inclusion. Ms. Rebecca, since now we know the initiatives being taken by Singapore and your institution, could you please highlight the inclusive practices that can be incorporated in classroom settings and how parents and teachers can be involved?
Now, before we talk about the strategies or intervention approaches that can be used for supporting inclusion in the classroom, I think we need to look at the barriers that exist that affect the teaching and learning of students with SEN. Let me quickly share my screen. Now, let's look at these three pictures. They all depict a similar scenario. 3 children watching or trying to watch a baseball match. However, in picture 1, the children had initial difficulties of watching the match because of the fence that was blocking them. So what happened here was that they were provided with some support. But as you can see, they were all provided with the same level of support. Yet, the shorter students still cannot see. Same in a fast-paced mainstream environment. We provide some support, but it still might not be enough for the weaker student. Now, in the second picture, the fence is still there blocking their view. But now there is differentiation that is happening. The level of support that is given depends on the needs of the child. So there is some tiered support for the child in the middle and the shortest child in order for them to be able to watch the match. However, in the last picture, there is no support given to any of the children. But what is happening here is that the fence has been removed. With the fence removed, there is no need to provide any support. All 3 children can now equally access the match comfortably. In fact, as they can even sit down to enjoy it. So what happened here was the barrier was removed. So if we translate this to how we can support learners with SEN, it's about creating a world without barriers. Challenge for us is to acknowledge this goal. We believe all can learn, but we also need to remind ourselves that they do not learn all the same way. If we use the weaker student as a baseline, we all can become better teachers. So we need to think about unnecessary barriers that can be removed so that we can provide an even kinder environment for our learners with SEN. And this can be done through applying the principles of the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL for short. The UDL is basically a framework of thinking about teaching and learning that helps give all students an equal opportunity to succeed. This approach offers flexibility in the ways students access material, engage with it, and show what they know. To understand what UDL is, it might be helpful to understand what it is not. The word universal may throw you off. It may sound like UDL is about finding one way to teach all kids, but UDL actually takes the opposite approach. The goal of UDL is to use a variety of teaching methods to remove any barriers to learning and give all students equal opportunities to succeed. It's about building in flexibility that can be adjusted for every student's strengths and needs. This approach to teaching doesn't specifically target kids who learn and think differently, but it can be especially helpful for them. You would have likely encountered many examples of it in your everyday life. Closed captions or subtitles, automatic doors, and accessibility features on smartphones. These are all some examples of universal design. These design elements help people with disabilities, but people who don't have disabilities may also want to use them. UDL provides that same kind of flexibility in the classroom. By applying UDL principles, teachers can effectively instruct a diverse group of learners. So firstly, UDL emphasizes on multiple methods of presentation. This principle of UDL addresses diverse learning styles and provides multiple opportunities for students to grasp the key concepts. Apply this principle by breaking up long lessons and reading assignments into activities that engage students in listening, watching, reflecting, and doing. UDL also recommends offering information in more than one format. For example, textbooks are primarily visual, but providing text, audio, video, and hands-on learning gives all kids a chance to access the material in whichever way is best suited to their learning strengths. Then the second principle of UDL is that students should be given multiple ways to express their comprehension and mastery of a topic. Consider accepting student assignment submissions in alternative formats, including oral presentations, videos, newspaper articles, etc. Make use of assistive technologies for increased communication and opportunities for students to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. So UDL suggests giving kids more than one way to interact with the material and to show what they have learned. So students might get to choose between taking a pencil and paper test, giving an oral presentation, or doing a group project. Then lastly, getting students excited about learning by providing multiple opportunities for engagement. Begin by focusing your course objectives on essential knowledge and skills. As you teach, clarify the importance of each topic and put students in an active learning role. Explain to students how the concepts you present are relevant to them and their daily lives. So UDL encourages teachers as well as parents to look for multiple ways to motivate students. Letting kids make choices and giving them assignments that feel relevant to their lives are some examples of how teachers can sustain students' interest. So with UDL, it makes learning more accessible for all learners. It presents information in ways that adapt to the learner instead of asking the learner to adapt to the information. Also by giving kids more than one way to interact with the material. UDL builds in flexibility that can make it easier for kids to use their strengths to work on their weaknesses. And lastly, it reduces stigma. Because you're giving a variety of options to all students, UDL doesn't single out the few who need that additional support.
Very insightful information indeed. And thank you for talking about the barriers and how removal of these barriers play a vital role in order to create a better learning environment for our learners. Thank you so much, Ms. Rebecca, for being with us today. Dear audience, as we all know that an inclusive educational environment is immensely beneficial to all of us. And Pakistan is also working really hard towards the path of inclusion. In order to know more, let's invite our next panelist. She is the Executive Director Reid, Remedial Teacher, Dyslexia Interventionist, experienced Chief Executive Officer with working experience of 35 years in the field of education. She is skilled in coaching, entrepreneurship and strategic planning. Let's invite Ma'am Shahina Alvi. Welcome, Ma'am Shahina Alvi. So, ma'am, my question for you is, what is inclusion and how can we establish inclusive schools in Pakistan?
Well, inclusion means full inclusion of children with diverse abilities in all aspects of schools that other children are able to enjoy, which means there are children like children with dyslexia, autistic children, Asperger's, all with different kinds of learning issues. And it involves regular schools and classrooms, not separate, but regular schools and classrooms, genuinely adapting and changing to meet the needs of all children. So it is a very regular classroom with these children and regular teaching is done there. So as well as celebrating and valuing differences, that means the children are respected for their differences also. And that is what children who have no challenges and are doing well in school, they learn a lot from these children, to respect them, to understand that it's okay to be different from other person. It's okay to have difficulties in certain areas, or they might have some very, very good, they may be very skilled at art, they may be very good with their hands, and that is something that the other children who have no difficulties learn to respect. And this definition of inclusion does not imply that children with diverse abilities will not receive specialized assistance or teaching outside of the classroom when required. It doesn't mean that they're left with teachers who are teaching children who have no difficulties, but these children, the children who come into the class like if children have problem with those children who have problem with phonics, they're taken into a certain part of the classroom and they are given special help in that area. But it is all within the classroom system. So wherever if you have a problem with maths, then the teacher, a specialized teacher will come and deal with that. So it is help is provided, but it is provided in an environment which is conducive to all kinds of children. The other children are continuing with their learning, and it doesn't sort of disrupt that. And inclusion assumes that all children, this is very important for people to understand, inclusion assumes that all children are a part of the regular school system from the very beginning of school, which means that if you have to establish an inclusive school, you should start right from the nursery level onwards. This may involve not only change in the way our schools are structured and work, but also a change in the attitudes of many special and regular educators, teachers, who view their job as to educate a certain type of children. So that thing in their heads that, you know, this child is not able to do it, I don't think he belongs in this class. This is what is happening now. Children who have difficulties in learning are taken out of class and sent for remediation, or within, even if it is within the school, but they lose a lot of time being taken out of the classroom, taken to a special place where they receive, and they are isolated. Their learning is isolated, it is not within the system. So they are not stupid, they understand that. So you are immediately drawing borders within the school students. And many schools advocate the use of child-centered approach to education, which implies that all teachers should be willing to meet the needs of all children. So what is the most important thing in establishing something like an inclusive school? Teacher training. You cannot have anybody teaching in a school which is inclusive who has not been trained in dealing with such children. They should be trained, they should be all-rounders, trained in normal teaching also, and also children who have different needs. And research has shown that both children learn from each other. The children who have no difficulties learn to respect the other children, they learn to be patient with them, they are ready to help them in any way, they are and they merge very well. This is only an adult concept that wo to bacha is not, you know, he's so different, how will he fit in that? Oh, they fit very well. If you start right from the beginning, that is why an inclusive school should start right from the bottom level, like nursery level, where children are growing together with differences. They're growing with differences, but that differences is only eyes of other people. For such children, they don't see the difference. They see only thing that they can relate to. And the children with learning difficulties learn to deal with, or they look at the way the children who have no learning difficulties learn things, how quickly they pick up. So it's a positive environment for all children, how children learn to help each other. Those are things that is inculcated in them.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Shaina, for sharing such wonderful information with us. I totally agree with you that we must celebrate and value the differences in the classroom setups. And if we'll do so, we'll actually bring about a change in the society. Thank you so much. So my next question to you is, now that we understand the need of establishing inclusive schools in Pakistan, I want Ms. Shaina Alvi to highlight the role of teachers training and also discuss some of the strategies that can be used in inclusive classroom setups.
The first strategy is to have trained teachers. It's not a strategy, it's a need. I wouldn't call it a strategy, but it is something that is very important, because it's not fair on the teachers and it's not fair on the children. The reason it's not fair in the teachers, because the teacher doesn't know how to deal with children who have learning differences or are challenged in any way where learning is concerned. They don't have the empathy, they don't know, and when you don't know how, then you start thinking there's something wrong with you, and when you think there's something wrong with you, you start blaming the child because the child is not learning what you are doing. So this is the most important thing. The biggest strategy, the biggest element in opening the need in opening an inclusive school, establishing it, is to have trained teachers. And if you have trained teachers, then things automatically the standard starts to rise. And also that within the classroom timings, the specialized teachers can come in during the time of reading. Supposing the children are reading, the specialized teachers with special skills in teaching reading come in and they take the group of children who have problem in reading separately. Okay, and the same thing goes for maths also. If a child has problem learning the concepts of math as in addition, subtraction, division, then a separate teacher who knows how to deal with ways of dealing with such children and teaching them with different kinds of aids. It's very important to have aids, like teaching them shapes, so you have them link the square with the circle, so the child will take both the things and link it. So those are the things. So inclusive school does not mean that the child is dealing only with teachers who have no who can only teach children who have no difficulties. So they do come in for different periods. They come in and work with such children even within in the classroom. Some schools are more aware. They have more empathy for such children. So they do take teachers that have been trained in teaching children with some kind of learning issues. So they help them within the system. That during the time of when they're doing art or doing something, the teachers helping them making some things, they're not very good with their hands. So the teachers there separately helping a group of children, and those strategies should be used because these children will then be sitting and not being able to do anything. So during the time when the other children are doing some, supposing they're doing geography, and in geography doing a certain country, like supposing they're doing Pakistan, they're studying the geography. So the certain student, one or two who can't understand because it's going at the pace is much faster. So they take set aside and they are explained separately. And mostly visuals are used, things that they can, like the map of Pakistan, what does it look, all the different places that are there, showing them on videos. Multisensory teaching strategies should be used as much as possible in teaching them any kind of new concept, especially, and and it should be always there, and the child should be asked, okay, what does the world look like? Is it like a ball? Is it like a square? Is it so he has to pick up and show what it looks like. Oh, what is the closest shape in this fruit to a oval shape. So you start working with them. The strategies and this can only be done when the teachers are trained. So I'll keep on insisting and emphasizing the fact that teacher training is important to use these strategies that can be, and they can be done. It's not something that is that is difficult. The only thing is teacher training. I will keep insisting this. Many times I will say, if the teachers are not trained, it is not their fault. They feel frustrated because they don't know what strategies should be used in dealing with such children. So if you train the teachers, we do the opposite. We first open a school and then we look for teachers to help run the school. It should be, I think, maybe the school, if you're opening a school, an inclusive school, first thing you should start doing in that inclusive school is training teachers to deal with such students who will be coming in later on. And the earlier you open it for the little kids, like absolute nursery, the strategies you use is start from the nursery and build it slowly. An inclusive school for children of ages maybe 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 years. That's it. And you see how it goes. How does it work? How many children are there per classroom? Then you learn how to, if maybe 12 is too many. Maybe because you can't predict how many children will come who have got learning issues, all different kinds of problems with their abilities. You don't know. So you have to be all prepared and ready for that.
Very well said, Ms. Shainalvi, and I totally agree with you that the biggest need of establishing inclusive schooling is the need of trained teachers and use of multisensory approaches and techniques in classroom setups so that our learners can do well. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your valuable thoughts with us. So now we know that in Pakistan we are witnessing that quite a lot of work is being done towards inclusion. So our next panelist is Ms. Sumreen Javed. She has done her Masters in Education Literature and she has obtained certification in ECED from Aga Khan University. She is an experienced teacher educator at the AMI school for the last 20 years. She is currently working as the Director Research and Development. She has conducted workshops and training sessions for Aga Khan University of Educational Development, Education Fund for SIM, Dow University of Health Sciences and KDSP. Let's welcome Ms. Sumreen. Ms. Sumreen, my first question from you is, could you talk about the current methodologies that are being implemented in the classroom setups in Pakistan?
Okay, I'll share my ideas and opinion as according to my expertise. So, with reference to what we do at our school to make our school a better inclusive school, or to improve the quality of inclusion at our school, we have been using a lot of approaches and strategies, and those strategies I'm going to share with you. We have been collaborating with a lot of professionals, including the speech therapist and psychologists and reading experts. We have been researching and training our teachers. So some of the strategies and approaches that we have been successfully using for inclusion at our school are multisensory approach. Multisensory instruction is a way of teaching where multiple senses are involved and engaged, so the learning is maximized. So different kind of learners, different type of learners are engaged as information is being given and received through multiple senses. Stronger connections are made, that the children learn better, they are able to express themselves better. So it is a very inclusive and a very modern approach that we have been using at our school. I'll give some of the examples of how we use multisensory approach in our school. So one of the example is how we teach in early years, how we teach letters and numbers to the children using multisensory approach. The teacher introduces a letter by showing a flashcard, she traces it, then she traces it by saying its formation, and then she traces it on a sand tray or a tray filled with any textured material, example salt or pulses. The child repeats the same. So when he is receiving the information through his auditory sense, through his visual sense and through tactile sense, he is able to memorize the letter more easily, and this memory is retained very easily. Other ways are the teacher forms a big letter on a floor, and the child moves a toy car on it using the correct formation, or the children jump on letter formed by the teacher on the floor to make words. So here all the different kinds of learners, visual, kinesthetic and auditory learners are engaged, so they learn in a better way. Other multisensory approaches that we use for teaching mathematics is concrete representational abstract, CRA, through which the children are being given concrete material which the children use, and then abstract is being shown through pictures, and then finally the symbols, for example 2 or plus, these symbols are shown, and so the children understand the concept very quickly, and this can be used in higher grades as well. We base our strategies and our approaches on UDL, Universal Design of Learning, which means that maximum students are involved, there are less barriers, and we are engaging most of the students. So multiple ways of instructions are used, multiple ways of engagement are used, multiple ways of expressions are used. So, and all the different kinds of learners are engaged, thus increasing the level of inclusion. So other approaches is whole brain teaching, where the teacher shares information in chunks through gestures and words. The children repeat those gestures and words when they are being designated the role of a teacher and a student. They work in pairs and they play the same role. So when they are listening, they are speaking and they are using gestures, the information and the knowledge is being retained in a better way, better connections are formed, and learning is emphasized, and all the different kind of learners, whether they have issues, learning difficulties, or they have a preferred learning style, they're all learning at the same level.
Thank you so much for sharing amazing strategies with us. I think it's very important that we use these strategies in classroom, and also these strategies are really impacting our individuals. Now it's important that we understand the strategies are needed. Now my next question is related to curriculum modification. Why curriculum modification is important and how it is to be done? Ms. Sumreen, could you highlight what accommodation, modification needs to be adapted in order to achieve curriculum goals to inclusive schools?
Curriculum is a document that designates where a student has to be led to. It gives the goals, or it gives the direction to all the students. If in order to make a school an inclusive school, we have to improve a curriculum is the main document which leads us to the students' achievement, where we have to take the students, and thus it has to include everyone in the school. So our curriculum, the curriculum that we use at our school is holistic. It actually gives space for all kind of learners. It gives them time to come to the point where the other students are already there. So it also gives a chance for the students to construct knowledge instead of merely giving them knowledge. It also allows them to learn at their own pace and using their own preferred style of learning. So having said so, even such a curriculum, such an organized curriculum cannot at times fulfill the need of students with learning difficulties and those who have learning issues. So what we do is that we make IEPs, individualized education plans, or sometimes we call them inclusive lesson plans. In our school we call it an inclusive lesson plan. So what we do is that we keep the learner's objectives or the common goals the same, but to achieve that target for special needs children or those who have learning difficulties, we accommodate or modify, and we use activities that can lead towards that goal, but with some individual attention, a little modification and adaptation. So those students are also taken towards the same goal and same achievement, but they are given a chance to go towards that goal, or to come to the finish line at their own pace. So this can improve the quality of inclusion if it's been practiced in all the schools in Pakistan. I would like to add that an inclusive curriculum should have all of these points that I've discussed, and if there is an inclusive curriculum, there is a chance that the schools can be more inclusive, and all the learners, those who have difficulties or those who easily learn, they all learn at the same pace.
Thank you very much, and I really like the way you said that curriculum must be skill-based, it should be holistic, and all the schools must take an initiative on working on the curriculum modification strategies. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your thoughts. Talking about culture of inclusiveness in Pakistan, Government of Sindh is playing a really vital role. And to represent the department, today we have with us Engineer Jamandaz Rathi, who is a Regional Director of Karachi for Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, Government of Sindh. Welcome, sir. So my question for you is, could you highlight the initiatives taken by the Government of Sindh to empower people with disabilities?
Well, if your question, there is a list number of initiatives I can count. First of all, in the Pakistan, first time we changed the motor vehicle law and we provide the license to the hearing impaired persons. Then we changed the name of the department into Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. In the last 4 and 5 years scheme, I will count these things. देन 2018 में हम एक एक्ट ले आए, लेजिस्लेशन पे हमने बहुत काम किया। 2018 में एक्ट ले आए, उस एक्ट के तहत हमने दो बड़े काम किए कि एक तो डिफरेंट एबल पर्सनस की प्रोटेक्शन अथॉरिटी कायम की, 5% कोटा को मैनेज करने की हमने कोशिश की। वो गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट में ऑलमोस्ट 5% कोटा इज मैनेज्ड, प्राइवेट सेक्टर में भी हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ये कोटा मैनेज हो। इसके अलावा हमने स्पेशल एजुकेशन की टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग एकेडमी सिंध में फर्स्ट टाइम वो डेवलप की और उस पर काम अभी भी चल रहा है, उसके कोर्स करिकुलम वगैरह डिज़ाइन हो रहे हैं, तो ये भी हमने एक्टिविटी की। इसके साथ साथ हमने जो है एम्पावरमेंट के हवाले से डिफरेंट फील्ड्स में सर्वे के हवाले से काम किया। हमने सर्वे कराई डिसेबल पर्सनस के हवाले से, उसकी भी डेटा हो रही है। CNIC के हवाले से हमने अपने डिस्ट्रिक्ट डिसेबिलिटी बोर्ड बनाए, डिस्ट्रिक्ट ग्रीवेंस कमेटी बनाई और अवेयरनेस के हवाले से भी हम लोगों ने बहुत डिपार्टमेंट एक्टिवली अब पार्टिसिपेट कर रहा है। डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन NGOs को भी ग्रांट दी गई हुई है। CRD हमारा प्राउड एक प्रोजेक्ट है जिसको हमने डेवलप किया है और अपकमिंग हमारी स्कीम्स है जिसमें सिंध में 5 CRD के नए इदारे हम ओपन करने चाह रहे हैं। हैदराबाद, दादू, लाड़काना, सखर, डिफरेंट सिटीज़ में हम CRD के नए इदारे, नए स्पेशल एजुकेशन कॉम्प्लेक्स कायम किए जा रहे हैं। वो डिफरेंट सर्विसेज को बेहतर अपडेट कर रहे हैं, जैसे इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटीज़ के लिए काम कर सकें। बेसिकली हमारा सारा स्ट्रक्चर विजिबल डिसेबिलिटीज़ के ऊपर काम कर रहा था, तो अब हम उसको इस तरफ ले जा रहे हैं कि हमें लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज़ पे भी काम कर सकें, इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटीज़ पे भी काम कर सकें। हमारा कोरंगी में ADHD सेंटर की बिल्डिंग जस्ट गोइंग टू बी कंप्लीट, तो वो वर्क फंक्शन करना शुरू करेगा। तो हम चाह रहे हैं कि वो लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज़ का एक बहुत बड़ा इदारा कराची में हमारा CRD की तरह बन जाएगा। आई वुड लाइक टू से कि CRD में इस वक्त 300 के करीब हमारे बच्चे इनरोल हैं। आई एम श्योर कि ये सारे इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटीज हैं। राइट नाउ हम ये तो नहीं कह सकते, एटलीस्ट मैं तो नहीं कह सकता कि ये सारे बच्चे आर्टिस्टिक हैं। दे आर कोमोबिलिटीज पे बच्चे हैं, किन बच्चों मोर टूवर्ड इंक्लाइंड आर्टिस्टिक, मोर टूवर्ड इंक्लाइंड ADHD, लाइक दीज चिल्ड्रंस आर। तो दीज आर किड्स, दे आर इनरोलिंग राइट नाउ। मगर मैं समझता हूँ कि CRD को अपनी फैसिलिटीज़, रिहेबिलिटेशन फैसिलिटीज़ फॉर ऑल पर्सन बिलोंग्स टू विद दिस इनविजिबल डिसेबिलिटीज़ उनको देनी चाहिए और वो बेहतर करनी चाहिए। यहाँ CRD को अभी काम करने की ज़रूरत है, तो वी हैव टू प्रोवाइड दिस रिहेबिलिटेशन सर्विस। इसको हमें ज़्यादा अपडेट करने की ज़रूरत है। दीज आर द इनिशिएटिव लास्ट 4 and 5 years। 2018 के एक्ट को हमने लॉ में भी तब्दील कर दिया गया है, वो भी 2022 में लॉ हो गए, बन गए हैं उसके। तो वी आर जस्ट इम्प्लीमेंटिंग फेज में, एट द राइट वी आर इन द इम्प्लीमेंटिंग फेज।
Wonderful initiatives taken by the government of Sindh. Well, my next question is that in this inspiring journey, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
So it's not something individual. This is a department or government of Sindh is working on it. So I personally think challenges ये है कि जब तक डिपार्टमेंट का सेक्रेटरी, डिपार्टमेंट का मिनिस्टर understand the material, there will be the change. There is a transfer posting issues. तो ये परमानेंटली 5 years एटलीस्ट किसी डिपार्टमेंट को, किसी सेक्रेटरी के पास अगर हो तो वो चीज़ों को बेहतर अंदाज से समझ सके। देयर इज़ अ लॉट ऑफ टर्मिनोलॉजी इश्यूज, मगर गवर्नमेंट इज़ कमेंटेड, गवर्नमेंट इज़ financing each and every institute, NGOs, also NGOs, they are financing, they are doing at their best level. There is no issue of finance, at least government side. हाँ, ह्यूमन रिसोर्स इशू है, मैनेजरियल रिसोर्स इशू है। मे बी आई थिंक हमें फॉरेन एक्सपर्ट्स की नीड हो इन चीज़ों में और डेवलप करने के लिए। जस्ट बिल्डिंगें बनाना इज़ नॉट solve the purpose. So we need expertise. We need building which is friendly with these invisible disabilities, friendly building we need. So there is a difference between just educational building and with special need building. So there are so many challenges. We have to work on these challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing your wonderful experience with us. No doubt here in Pakistan, schools and institutions are working really hard towards inclusion. But we get to see that social media is also playing a vital role in understanding and spreading the concept of inclusion. In order to know more and to have a better perspective, today I have with me Ms. Rabia Aziz. She is the founder of an online support group called Special Needs Pakistan, which was created in 2013, and a social care initiative called Alia's Care Packages. She is a motivational speaker, facilitator, social worker, and a caregiver. She has spoken in many diverse platforms, from Facebook, TED, youth empowerment programs and camps, corporate events, social media and televisions, and educational institutions. So my question from you, Ma'am Rabia, is that what could be the challenges of inclusion in Pakistan?
You know, ये जो सवाल है इसका to understand what actually inclusion means, शमूलियत होती क्या है, it is so important, because in the dictionary the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure is inclusion. And if more and more Pakistanis can understand what is this, what are the obstacles that we face, physical barriers हो गए, inappropriateness हो गई, intolerance हो गई, inequality, injustice, इतनी सारी चीज़ें हैं जो हम कहते जाएं, सुनते जाएं, but it doesn't make us any more aware. So the crux of the entire situation is literacy and awareness. As soon as we start raising awareness, we are going to be so much more tolerant. We are going to be so much more aware. You know, एक बहुत interesting चीज़ है. 8 साल पहले I was in a situation जहाँ पे मुझे नहीं पता था कि inclusion किसे कहते हैं, क्या होता है, until मेरी बेटी इस दुनिया में आई. और जब वो इस दुनिया में आई, I did not have any support. I did not have a clinic. I did not have a specialist. I did not have any kind of system. And that is where systems came together, support came together, networks came together, and Special Needs Pakistan was created. Special Needs Pakistan has worked with many organizations like Kazim and many others, but it came to benefit and create an inclusive society. An inclusive society जहाँ पे हर कोई शामिल होता है. And when we talk about challenges, rising to these challenges is very important. हम रैम्प्स कहाँ देखते हैं, हम जहाँ जाते हैं, कभी किसी ने सोचा है कि मैमोग्राम किस तरह होता है, तो एक औरत जो व्हीलचेयर में है उसका मैमोग्राम किस तरह होता है. These are small things. How do kids go to inclusive educational setups? How is the government, what kind of resources and what kind of budgets are being set to make this a more inclusive society? There are a lot of people are doing very good work. So we have to be mindful that there is a lot of good work happening. But these organizations which are doing their work, how are they promoting and allowing people to understand what inclusivity is? जो हमारा मुआशरा है, which is a very societal, very stigma ridden, taboo ridden society, इधर समझाना कि ये बच्चा बात सही करता है, तुतलाता है, लेकिन सही है, ठीक हो जाएगा. Everything does not need to be fixed. And the moment we realize that we do not need to fix others, we need to co-live with others, that is when we are going to be kind, we are going to be empathetic, and we're going to be a more inclusive society.
Thank you so much. Very well said. I totally agree that we need literacy and awareness to remove these roadblocks and which stops us to achieve our goals. And we have to co-live together to develop a better inclusive society. Now moving on to my next question is, what role does media play in unlocking the potential of inclusion in Pakistan?
This is such an interesting question क्योंकि इस वक्त हम क्या कर रहे हैं? इस वक्त हम information create कर रहे हैं ताकि वो फैले masses में. What has digital media, tech literacy, what has social media done for us? It has made and transformed this world into such a small place. Okay, in a matter of seconds, information reaches from point A to B. We have 230 million plus people living in Pakistan, and yet information now is at our fingertips, at the touch of a click or at the tap of a fingertip. What is happening? इतनी दुनिया छोटी हो गई है हमारे लिए कि कोई बंदा कराची में बैठा हो या सवात में, और अगर उनके पास सेम इश्यूज हैं, their network becomes so small. And again, मैं दोहराती हूँ क्योंकि challenges हर जगह face हो रही हैं. We are lacking training facilities, we are lacking resources, we are lacking budgets, we are lacking a lot of things. But what we are not lacking in our country right now is social media, media presence, newspapers, digital awareness, TV channels, journalists, everybody who has an Android and a phone and something connecting them. Connectivity has become so strange and yet so fulfilling, because जो चीज़, जो awareness हम सालों में ना रेस कर सके, वो हम लोगों ने चंद लम्हों में रेस कर दी. So yes, media is playing an integral part in creating awareness, in making our country more inclusive, allowing us to be more connected to the outside world, learning what the new techniques are, learning what the advancements are, learning कि again एक बंदा जो नॉर्थ में बैठा हुआ है और एक बंदा जो साउथ में बैठा हुआ है, अगर उनके बच्चे सिमिलर सिचुएशन से गुजर रहे हैं तो वो किस तरह ऑनलाइन कनेक्ट करके वर्चुअली अपने बच्चों का सहारा बन सकते हैं, अपने बच्चों का एडवोकेट बन सकते हैं. सो यस, देयर आर सो मेनी पीपल. 8 साल पहले अगेन मेरी बेटी को एपर्ट सिंड्रोम है. 8 साल पहले किसी को नहीं पता था एपर्ट सिंड्रोम होता क्या है. इस वक्त 27 जुलाई को एक बेटी किसी के घर में पैदा हुई जिसको एपर्ट सिंड्रोम है, एंड दे रीच्ड आउट टू मी एंड आई वाज माइंड ब्लोन, बिकॉज नाउ व्हेन एन एपर्ट बेबी इज बोर्न दे से आलिया की माँ के साथ हम राब्ता करते हैं, लेट अस नो व्हाट वी कैन डू. सो टेक्नोलॉजी has created media to fulfill a role, a very integral role, which means networking and connecting. And healthcare facilities, doctors, everything is under one roof virtually. So awareness has spread and gone, miles and miles. Yeah.
No doubt that media is playing a vital role and helping us to learn new techniques and allowing us to be more connected. Thank you so much, Ms. Rabia Aziz, for being with us today. Thank you so much for enlightening the role of social media towards inclusion. Dear audience, this brings me towards the end of our panel discussion. I hope you all had a wonderful time. I would like to take the opportunity to thank our honorable panelists and our audience for participating with us today. In the end, I would just like to quote Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. Thank you so much.